Amateur Radio News and Notes for Friday, May 8th, 2026. I'm Ed Kavik, November 2, Echo Charlie. In the log this week, we've got the United States Armed Forces Day Crossband test happening Saturday, May 9th. Also, we're going to get ready for Dayton Hamvention on May 15th to 17th, 2026. And also, QRPARCI's 4 Days in May happening this Thursday, May 14th, 2026. We'll also talk about some MVARC Nets on the air, see what's happening with DX, get a solar activity update, talk about some upcoming contests, and take a look at interesting online radio content. As always, links to all the reference content can be found in the show notes or at our Substack at mvarc.substack.com. Saturday brings the annual Armed Forces Day Crossband test to the air. The United States Department of Defense runs the event, which is open to all licensed amateur radio operators. It's designed to test crossband two-way communications between military stations and radio amateurs as authorized in 47 CFR 97.111. Several military stations at locations around the United States will transmit on military frequencies and will announce those frequencies on the amateur radio bands they will monitor. Full details of stations and frequencies can be found at a link in the show notes. Next weekend brings the 2026 edition of the Dayton Hamvention to the Greene County Fair and Expo Center in Xenia, Ohio. Dayton Hamvention is the biggest ham fest in the world, with last year's attendance of 36,814 attendees. Hamvention starts on Friday, May 15th, 2026 from 9 a.m. to 5 p.m., continues Saturday, 9 a.m. to 5 p.m., and Sunday, 9 a.m. to 1 p.m. This year's theme is Radio Adventure, and as always, there will be a ton of vendors, tailgate sellers, and an extensive lineup of forums. Amateur Radio News and Notes will be there again this year to take in the show and report on the latest developments. If you're going this year and you see me, definitely say hello. For more information about Dayton Hamvention, including lists of vendors and scheduled forums, visit hamvention.org. Thursday, May 14th, 2026 brings the 2026 edition of the QRP Amateur Radio Club International's 4 Days in May conference in Fairborn, Ohio. 4 Days in May is the preeminent conference relating to QRP operation, and it is always filled with fascinating talks. This year, there's something for everyone with talks about homebrewing effective QRP operations, the design of the CFT1 radio, learning CW, using amateur radio in the aftermath of Hurricane Helene, vibe coding for amateur radio, building a remote magnetic loop antenna, and developing automatic antenna tuners for the 640-meter 2200 meter and 1800 hertz bands. In addition to the talks during the conference, Hans Summers, G0UPL of QRP Labs, and Ashar Farhan, VU2ESC of HF Signals, have evening talks to give announcements. Amateur Radio News and Notes will be on the scene once again this year to keep you in the loop. While the in-person registrations are no longer available, the Zoom webinar is still available as we go to press on the QRPARCI site. For more information, visit qrparci.org/FDIM. And now let's talk about some MVARC Nets on the air. We have our 2-meter FM net Tuesdays at 7 p.m. on the repeater. That is immediately followed by the 2-meter digital net on Yaesu Systems Fusion C4 FM on the same frequency. And on the weekends, we've got the MVARC Slow Speed CW Roundtable Saturday and Sundays at 7:30 a.m., where all are welcome. And that's on 3.565 megahertz CW. And that's followed by the MVARC Cherry Tree Net on Saturday and Sunday at 8:30 a.m. Eastern Time, at 3.920 megahertz lower sideband, where we always have a great conversation, and you're always welcome to join us. And now let's see what's happening with DX. There will be a lot of DX on the air this week. Stations on the air include Rodrigues Island, Kenya, Azores, South Cook Islands, Burkina Faso, French Polynesia, Galapagos, Western Sahara, Minami Torishima, and Colombia. A calendar of DX expeditions can be found at dxnews.com/calendar, and NG3K's announced DX operations list at ng3k.com. And now it's time for a solar activity update as we go to press. The Solar Flux Index, or SFI, was 117, and the estimated sunspot number was 59, with 4 numbered sunspot regions visible from Earth. Over the last week, the SFI has decreased. Solar activity has been at moderate levels in the last 24 hours. The geomagnetic field has been at quiet to unsettled levels in the last 24 hours, and the KP index reached 3 yesterday. The solar wind peaked at 423 kilometers per second. Solar activity is predicted to be at low levels with a chance of M-class flares today through Sunday. The geomagnetic field is forecast to be at quiet to active levels today and Saturday, and at quiet to unsettled levels on Sunday. The chance of solar radiation storms at the S1 or greater level is at 1% today through Sunday. R1 to R2 radio blackouts are possible, with a predicted probability of 45% today through Sunday. R3 or greater blackouts are possible, with a 10% chance predicted today through Sunday. It remains a fantastic time for amateurs to get on the air and work the world. Good sources of real-time solar information include spaceweatherlive.com and solarham.com. A good overview of conditions can be found at dx.qsl.net/propagation. To see daily absorption data and associated radio blackouts, check out the NOAA DRAP page. And to see real-time maximum usable frequency, or MUF, and critical frequency, or FOF2 information from radio sonde data, visit prop.kc2g.com. And now let's take a look at some upcoming contests. This weekend brings the Flemish Windmill Contest, the Volta WW Riddy Contest, the CQM International DX Contest, the SKCC Weekend Sprintathon, the Canadian Prairies QSO Party, the 50 megahertz Spring Sprint, and the 4 States QRP Second Sunday Sprint. As always, the K1 USN SSTs, the MSTs, and the CWTs will also be on the air. The full contest calendar with events and exchanges can be found at contestcalendar.com. And now let's wrap things up with some interesting online radio content. As always, the links to everything we're about to mention here can be found in the show notes or at our Substack at mvarc.substack.com. Caitlin K8FAE and Mike K8MRD have a challenging activation at Okeechobee Battlefield State Park. Kevin W1DED talks to Nick VK9DX about his thoughts on ham radio from Norfolk Island between Australia and New Zealand. Craig KM6LYW takes a look at the TID Radio TDH9 for use in digital modes. IMSci Guy does a 6-part series on understanding filters for RF. Takeshi JS1QIZ goes camping and operates QRPCW in Japan during a contest. This one's in Japanese, but it is beautiful and fun to watch. Walt K4OGO tests out the Micro PA50 and Micro PA100 amps in the field. Michael W8CI tells you what to expect at this year's Dayton Hamvention. Hayden VK7HH gives his soldering tips for success. Josh KI6NAZ takes the spectrally impure anniversary Baofeng and replaces the radio with a compliant one. Cyprian Y06DXE builds a NFET half-wave antenna with an FT140-43 for QRP operation. Michael KB9VBR experiments with a center-loaded vertical modification. Ramon EA5IW takes us to the mountains of Spain for a 2-watt QRP contact with Belgium. Mike KMRD makes a beginner-friendly DIY HF antenna. Forrest KI7QCF reactivates his first SOTA and announces a CW paddle giveaway. Hans G0UPL shows an improvement to the QMX and QMX Plus firmware to improve power supply performance. Bobby W6IWN shows a 3-element Yagi for portable operation. Ben VE6SFX shows his new antenna winder design. And Tim K5OHY shows different quarter-wave vertical setups and how to get gain via parasitic elements. Well, that is it for this week. I've been Ed, November 2 Echo Charlie. Thanks, as always, for joining us. We hope you have a great week ahead. Best 73, and we look forward to seeing you next week.